Subscribe, like, and comment right now because you won't believe the shocking transformation that unfolded before our very eyes. In a raw and relentless journey of despair and redemption, this is the untold story of a dog once abandoned to a fate no living soul should endure. On a sweltering afternoon in a forgotten corner of the city, where cracked sidewalks and peeling paint testified to years of neglect, a small dog limped through a maze of shadowed alleyways. His fur was matted with grime, and his eyes, once bright with the promise of childhood play, now held only the haunted look of deep abandonment. The passers-by barely spared a glance, dismissing him as a nuisance, a living relic of urban decay. Yet, beneath that battered exterior lay a heart yearning for compassion and a future different from the one destiny had carved out in the cold concrete maze. In this urban wasteland, every detail of the day resonated with an uneasy contrast. The staccato rhythm of distant traffic collided with the eerie silence of an empty lot, setting the stage for a metamorphosis that would shock even the most hardened observer. There was an unsettling quality to the scene, a stark reminder that beneath the ordinary hum of daily life, there often churns an undercurrent of unimaginable sorrow. People whispered about the neglected stray, referring to him as that poor soul, or the forgotten hound, never daring to imagine that this creature, though broken, possessed an indomitable spirit. Every scratch on his body, every droplet of rain that streaked down his gaunt face, was a silent testament to years of cruelty and neglect. His existence had been a perpetual struggle, a life spent navigating a harsh world devoid of kindness. His life began in a similarly indifferent setting, a sprawling suburb where people hurried by without a second glance, leaving behind the faint echo of forgotten promises. Abandoned by a family that had once claimed to love him, the dog was thrust into a world of hardship. The neighborhood was a patchwork of familiar streets and hidden corners that held secrets of both laughter and loss. It was here, amidst concrete and faded hopes, that the dog's story commenced its haunting narrative. In one such ordinary street, lined with aging brick houses and overgrown hedges, the dog would wander in search of scraps and a moment of tenderness. The scent of neglected meals and the rustle of stray papers were his constant companions. Yet even as the seasons changed, his battered form never fully recovered its lost vigor. Despite the relentless passage of time, his eyes kept a spark alive, a spark that hinted at a survival instinct rarely seen in the abandoned. A gust of wind carried through the narrow alley, rustling loose papers and stirring a swirl of dust around his frail legs. The noise, both harsh and unyielding, reminded him of a world indifferent to his plight. But that same wind would also bear the distant echo of hope, a subtle prelude to the dramatic shift that was about to unfold. The moment was charged, heavy with the tension of unspoken memories and the grim determination of a creature pushed to the edge. Across town, in a modest animal shelter tucked away in a part of the city that still believed in second chances, gentle hands worked tirelessly to nurse forgotten animals back to life. This sanctuary was more than a haven. It was a testament to human resilience and the unyielding desire to mend broken lives. The shelter, filled with the quiet hum of hope and murmurs of care, was where whispers of the abandoned dog had reached compassionate ears. Volunteers prepared for a rescue, their hearts aching with anticipation as they recalled the countless souls who had once been given the chance for rebirth. The shelter's atmosphere was punctuated by the soft patter of rain against stained windows and the low, comforting hum of a heater on a cold day. Here, every animal had a story, a tapestry woven with threads of both suffering and recovery. The volunteers, with their calloused hands and gentle smiles, embodied the belief that love and persistence could transform even the most harrowing fate. In the midst of routine care, a sudden mention of a particularly neglected dog stirred something profound in them, a determination to rewrite a life marred by indifference. At the edge of the shelter's compound, one volunteer, a compassionate soul with kind eyes and calloused hands, remembered the day he first encountered the mangy stray. The memory was imprinted like a scar on his heart. It was a moment of profound helplessness as he witnessed the dog's hopeless wandering along desolate streets. That memory had not faded, but had instead fueled his resolve to bring the dog back from the brink, a promise whispered in the silence of many lost hours. In the midst of grim circumstances, the volunteer initiated a covert plan to coax the dog into safety. With nothing more than bits of food and gentle words, he ventured into the labyrinth of the urban sprawl where the dog roamed. Every step was measured, every movement intentional. The volunteer knew that trust had to be rebuilt, and that even the most damaged hearts could be healed with time and compassion. His determination lit up in the quiet intervals of the day, a beacon in the encroaching gloom of neglect. The encounter was nothing short of heartbreaking. In a narrow alley shadowed by dilapidated buildings, the volunteer saw the dog crouch beneath a flickering street lamp. The light, erratic and cold, cast an otherworldly glow on the creature's emaciated frame. There was a palpable tension in the air, an electrical charge that seemed to momentarily suspend time. The dog's eyes, though dulled by despair, flickered with a hint of recognition as the volunteer knelt, extending a tentative hand laden with warmth and sustenance. Their eyes met in a silent conversation that transcended words, a dialogue of pain, hope, and a promise of renewal. The volunteer's soothing murmurs, wrapped in the gentlest cadence, resonated with the dog's suppressed yearning for a kinder life. As seconds turned into minutes, the barrier of mistrust began to dissolve, one fragile drop of hope at a time. The volunteer's face was etched with concentration and compassion, a stark contrast to the gritty backdrop of the urban decay that had once been the dog's entire world. Within that emotionally charged moment, an unspoken understanding was formed. It was a silent pact, a vow to restore the dignity and life that had been stripped away by years of neglect. With careful deliberation, the volunteer scooped the dog into his arms, feeling the fragile heartbeat that pulsed like a tiny drum of life. There was no fanfare, only the soft, rhythmic sound of a life slowly finding its way back from oblivion. The journey from that moment was fraught with challenges and unexpected detours, as the volunteer navigated not only the physical distances between disparate corners of the city, but also the complex emotional landscape of a creature rebuilt from remnants of despair. Their path took them through streets lined with quiet determination, under neon lights that flickered like stars in a polluted sky, and through neighborhoods that whispered stories of loss and renewal alike. In one part of the city, where bustling marketplaces and vibrant street art painted a picture of everyday resilience, the dog began to experience life for the first time as more than an abandoned soul. Here, in the midst of human hustle and genuine bursts of communal warmth, he encountered moments of beauty, a child's spontaneous laughter, an elderly man's compassionate smile, the gentle hum of life persisting despite the scars of hardship. Each interaction was a small, transformative brushstroke against the grim canvas of his past. Yet, even as the dog's life began to hint at a promising future, the stark specter of his former existence remained etched into the quiet corners of his mind. Like a shadow that clung stubbornly to the light, memories of neglect emerged in unexpected moments. A sudden clash of voices in a crowded street corner, or the jarring flash of a neon sign against a backdrop of twilight, could unseat him from the fragile calm he was beginning to cultivate. The new world was as unpredictable as it was beautiful, a delicate dance of hope and reminder of past suffering. The city itself, with its sprawling streets and hidden alleys, served as an ever-changing backdrop to this poignant transformation. Every block breathed a story of survival, every crack in the pavement a memoir of resilience. It was in these seemingly ordinary intersections that the dog's transformation began to take shape, a slow but steady ascent from the depths of despair into a life reborn by compassion. The volunteer, now a steadfast guardian, walked alongside him with a steady resolve that belied the chaos of the urban environment. In the comforting yet chaotic expanse of an animal hospital, a place of healing and unforeseen challenges, the dog underwent a series of treatments that mirrored his journey toward trust. The sterile smells of antiseptic mingled with the soft murmur of busy staff, forming an auditory symphony that underscored every step of the recovery. Here, professional hands and caring hearts worked in unison, addressing the physical scars that told the story of neglect. Every wound was tenderly tended to, every fearful whimper met with reassurance. For the dog, each gentle touch was a reminder that kindness, though once a stranger, could now be found in abundance. Throughout the early hours of recovery, the dog's transformation was not merely physical, but emotional. The juxtaposition of sterile white walls and the tender murmur of care created a striking parallel to the dual nature of his existence. A life that had known harsh neglect now stood on the precipice of a deeply humane rebirth. The hours in that hospital stretched like a liminal space between what had been and what could be, a critical juncture where the pain of the past began to recede in the face of nurturing compassion. As the dog slowly recuperated, the hospital's corridors bore witness to the quiet triumphs of healing. The tender exchange between a nurse's soothing words and the animal's tentative responses became a microcosm of a much larger narrative. Every successful step, however small, whispered of redemption, a transformation that was as much about mending the spirit as it was about healing the body. Here, in these sterile yet hopeful confines, the neglected stray began to redefine what it meant to live again. Between the bustling life of the city and the guarded sanctuary of the animal hospital, one could sense that something profound was unfolding, a metamorphosis that defied the bleak expectations of a past drenched in sorrow. The volunteer observed, with heart both heavy and hopeful, as the dog's eyes grew less haunted and more curious, as if the once narrow lens of despair was gradually broadening to include the vivid hues of possibility. Yet in the midst of this tender revival, moments of stark contrast shattered any illusion of an easy journey. On one particular rainy afternoon, as the volunteer took the dog on a tentative walk along a long-forgotten boulevard, an unexpected outburst of harsh voices and confused stares punctuated the serenity of their progress. The street, known to be a quiet passage for local vendors, erupted with tension as local residents confronted the pair with a mixture of suspicion and ingrained prejudice. The air charged with unspoken judgments, the dog flinched at every raised voice and sudden movement. This jarring intrusion into the slowly regaining calm was a vivid reminder of the precarious balance between progress and the lingering shadows of the past. In that moment, the city itself seemed to convulse with conflicting emotions. The painful murmurs of distrust clashed with the gentle cadence of the volunteers' reassurances, creating an atmosphere that was both charged and vulnerable. The stray's frail body trembled not just from the chill of the rain, but from the weight of a past that refused to remain buried. The unexpected confrontation was a harsh punctuation in his long sentence of neglect, underscoring the reality that even as he blossomed into a symbol of hope, the scars of his previous life were not so easily erased. Throughout these early days of recovery, the narrative of the neglected dog was interwoven with moments of delicate triumph and sudden turmoil. With every passing day, his transformation was marked by both the gentle unfoldment of trust and the jarring echoes of a painful past. His journey was not defined by a single moment of rescue, but by a series of fragile victories carved out against overwhelming odds, a story that resonated with anyone who has ever felt abandoned or overlooked. As twilight descended on the city, casting long shadows over the quiet streets and forgotten alleyways, the volunteer led the dog to a modest sanctuary, a place that promised stability and compassion, and where the echoes of neglect could finally be silenced by love. This humble residence, nestled in an unassuming neighborhood, was yet another stage in the dog's journey. Here, against the backdrop of everyday life, the lessons of hardship and hope would converge to redefine the very essence of what it meant to be rescued. Inside this new sanctuary, the atmosphere was markedly different. The low hum of a television provided a gentle soundtrack to the evening, while the soft glow of a table lamp illuminated chipped photographs and worn mementos of happier times. Every corner of the modest apartment was imbued with the volunteers' efforts to create a haven, a safe space replete with tender memories and promises for the future. In this sanctuary, small acts of kindness took on monumental significance, each as important as a heartbeat in the delicate pulse of the dog's newfound life. Under the volunteers' unwavering care, the dog began to explore the nuances of an existence that transcended mere survival. His initial wariness gave way to tentative steps, as he slowly ventured beyond the confines of the room to sample the textures, sounds, and scents of normalcy. The quiet clink of a feeding bowl, the warm embrace of a soft blanket, and the gentle encouragement in every offered treat became symbols of a life reimagined. In a way, his daily routines were transformed into rituals of healing, a delicate dance between the remnants of a shadowed past and the promise of a luminous future. In the soft glow of the early evening, as the volunteer watched the dog cautiously navigate his newfound world, there was a profound sense of continuity, a belief that even the most scarred creatures could learn to trust again. The transformation was not instantaneous, nor was it free of setbacks, but each small victory was a building block of a life gradually reclaimed from despair. Every whispered word of encouragement, every slow, deliberate gesture of care, and every moment of silent understanding between the dog and his guardian built a narrative of redemption that was as inspiring as it was heart-wrenching. The journey ahead would be long and fraught with unexpected challenges, yet the flicker of hope in the dog's eyes was a silent promise that no past, however dark, could forever shroud the brightness of a new beginning. In the stillness of that modest home, as the night deepened and the city outside continued its ceaseless hum, the neglected dog lay resting, a living testament to the transformative power of compassion. His journey, though filled with raw, undeniable pain, was also a story of astounding resilience. And as the gentle rhythm of nighttime settled over the quiet neighborhood, there lingered a promise that in this intricate tapestry of broken moments and healing miracles, every creature deserved a second chance at life. And so, beneath the soft lamplight and amidst the muted sounds of a city preparing for sleep, the story of the neglected dog began to unfurl its next chapter, a chapter defined by fragile hope, emerging strength, and a relentless determination to transform darkness into light. The journey continued as days melted into weeks, each one weaving a richer tapestry of hope and hidden fears. In the quiet dawn of a new morning, the city seemed to exhale a gentle sigh, a breath of promise that carried with it the quiet murmur of healing. The dog, now timidly stepping into a world that offered him both solace and challenge, became ever more attuned to the rhythm of his new life. The volunteer's eyes shone with steadfast determination as he observed this slow metamorphosis from a distance that was at once both protective and respectful. Morning walks became ritualistic pilgrimages through neighborhoods that teetered between peaceful normalcy and an undercurrent of unpredictable tension. The dog's ears perked at every rustle of the wind, every subtle change in the ambient noise hinting at a narrative beyond the immediate moment. In these early hours, when the city was barely waking and the street still held the whisper of dreams, the transformative power of trust was at work. The volunteer, carrying a small bag of treats and a heart full of hope, led his new companion along brick-lined sidewalks and past shuttered cafes that held echoes of better times. In one of these quiet strolls, they entered a narrow lane lined with vibrant murals, a collage of graffiti that reflected the pulse and attitude of the local community. The colors danced under the nascent light, symbolizing both the vibrancy of life and the chaos that often lingers beneath its surface. Here, the dog paused, his eyes meeting the myriad expressions of art and life that filled the walls. The dog, who had known only the bleak hues of neglect for so long, seemed momentarily transfixed by the burst of creative defiance. The volunteer watched silently, his gaze softening with each shared, silent acknowledgement of beauty amid decay. Yet, as with every ray of hope, there was an equally potent undercurrent of disquiet. The urban landscape, with all its shifting moods, was not immune to unexpected tremors. Late one afternoon, amid the ordinary chatter of city life, a sudden disturbance shattered the comfortable cadence of routine. From a nearby park that served as a communal refuge, raised voices and hurried footsteps broke the stillness. A small crowd had gathered, their faces a perplexing mixture of anger and disbelief. The commotion, though seemingly about a minor local dispute, carried an edge that hinted at something more unsaid, more raw. At the center of this unfolding scene was an elderly gentleman who had always been known for his quiet presence in the neighborhood. His furrowed brow and trembling hands betrayed a deeper sorrow, an echo of loss that had haunted him for years. As the volunteer approached cautiously, the dog's ears pricked and his body tensed. Reflexively, he sensed that the atmosphere was charged with emotions too complex to simply ignore. In that moment, the volunteer's gentle reassurance mingled with the muted cadence of the city, forming an almost imperceptible bridge between a past filled with abandonment and a future yet to be written. The volunteer's intervention, marked by soft words and calm gestures, slowly diffused the tension. The elderly man, his eyes moist with unspoken grief, accepted a quiet acknowledgement of his own loneliness in the city. The brief encounter left an indelible mark on the dog's psyche, reinforcing the idea that even amidst the unpredictable clamor of everyday life, moments of fragile beauty could emerge from the unexpected. As they resumed their walk, the volunteer couldn't shake the image of the old man's sorrowful eyes, a reminder that every life, be it human or animal, bore scars beneath their outward veneer. Back at the modest sanctuary that had become the dog's new home, the volunteer found solace in small acts of care that quickly added up to monumental changes. In the gentle routine of feeding, grooming, and quiet play, the dog began to show hints of a personality that was both resilient and inquisitive. His once vacant gaze now sparkled intermittently with curiosity, as if each passing moment brought with it the promise of discovery and belonging. The gentle hum of the radio and the soft clatter of a well-worn clock provided a constant counterpoint to the torrent of emotions that ebbed and flowed within him. Inside those familiar walls, the dog's interactions with the volunteer blossomed into a delicate ritual of mutual healing. Every shared glance became a silent conversation, a subtle interplay of trust and gratitude. The volunteer, aware of the precarious nature of this recovery, matched each step with a patient kindness, echoing the belief that love could reshape even the most hopeless existence. In these moments, the world outside, the city's chaotic pulse, seemed to recede, leaving behind the quiet sanctuary of two souls forging an unlikely bond. Evenings brought with them a calm intensity. The fading light painted the interior with long shadows and a muted glow, inviting reflective silence. It was during these hours that both the dog and the volunteer retreated into contemplative solitude, each lost in their own thoughts. The dog, settled on a soft cushion near the window, seemed to peer out at the passing silhouettes of trees and distant traffic, his eyes reflecting memories of both pain and fleeting joy. The volunteer sat nearby, often lost in thought as he contemplated the long and arduous path of recovery that lay ahead, both for his furry companion and perhaps for himself as well. On one such evening, as a gentle rain began to dribble against the window pane, the volunteer found himself drawn into a memory of his own, a recollection of loneliness, of times when the world had seemed so unyielding and indifferent. The rain, tapping a steady rhythm, became a metaphor for both cleansing and renewal, washing away remnants of despair in quiet, persistent waves. The dog, sensing the undercurrent of melancholy, moved closer, resting his head on the volunteer's lap in a silent plea for connection. This simple act of trust, so easily given yet so rarely granted in the past, became a turning point in their shared narrative, a potent reminder that even in the depths of isolation, the smallest gestures of warmth could break through. As the cycle of days turned into weeks, the dog's transformation became more pronounced. His once shuddering steps turned into measured ones, and the stiffness in his gait gave way to a cautious exuberance. With every new morning, the city revealed a bit more of its layered soul, its inviting streets, its hidden pockets of joy, and its subtle reminders of past anguish. The volunteer, ever vigilant, marveled at the resilience that had taken root in the face of overwhelming odds, acknowledging the bittersweet irony that strength sometimes arises from the deepest wounds. A subtle, almost imperceptible shift in the atmosphere began to take shape, one that blurred the lines between the everyday and the extraordinary. The dog's newfound confidence, paired with the volunteer's unwavering compassion, seemed to disturb the stagnant air of their surroundings. Whispers of change spread quietly among the local residents, many of whom had previously taken little notice of the stray that once wandered these streets. Gradually, the man who had once been a source of silent anguish came to be recognized as a symbol of redemption, a living reminder that every creature carried within itself a spark of hope, waiting to be fanned into a flame. Yet, amidst these tender recoveries, hints of unresolved mysteries lingered like shadows at the edge of a flickering light. In the stillness of a particularly sleepless night, when the wind carried a faint, almost imperceptible murmur that defied explanation, the dog stirred restlessly. There was something in the sound, a cadence that spoke of hidden places and long-forgotten secrets. The volunteer, awakened by the subtle tension that now shrouded the night, rose with a quiet urgency. Moving towards the window, he listened intently as the rain fell in a pattern that seemed almost too deliberate to be mere coincidence. For a moment, the lines between routine and the inexplicable blurred, leaving him wondering if the past was trying to find its way back, or if there were deeper mysteries at play in the silent, rain-washed hours. Despite the mounting questions, the volunteer chose not to disturb the fragile peace that had so painstakingly taken root. Instead, he resolved to remain watchful, to trust in the steady rhythm of recovery and the gentle persistence of kindness. He knew that the emotional scars, though slowly healing, would always serve as a reminder of the complexities of life, a bittersweet testament to both suffering and the transformative power of care. This inner dialogue persisted as a quiet counterpoint to the everyday tasks that now defined their existence: shared meals at the small kitchen table, casual strolls under the soft glow of streetlights, and the comforting murmur of familiar voices outside their window. In the unfolding chapters of their lives, both the volunteer and the dog began to grasp that recovery was neither linear nor predictable. It was a mosaic of fragile moments, each one a delicate interplay of light and shadow, warmth and chill. The city continued to offer up its unpredictable blend of the ordinary and the uncanny. Every open window, every creaking floorboard in their modest home, carried a story, sometimes of mundane routines, sometimes of the inexplicable drama of life lived at the margins. The dog's transformation, remarkable as it was, served as an emblem of this balance, a vivid illustration that within every heartbeat lay the potential for both joy and sorrow, for beginnings and the echoes of what had once been. And so, with each passing day, the shelter of their small home became a crucible of emotions, a space where the painful scars of neglect met the tender promise of new beginnings. In quiet moments of reflection, the volunteer recalled his own early struggles, the darkness that had once threatened to overwhelm him, and found solace in the shared vulnerability that had drawn him to rescue not just a stray, but a wounded soul. The silent conversations between man and dog deepened into a language beyond words, a language of empathy, resilience, and unyielding trust. As the second phase of their journey unfolded, the narrative took on a rhythm that was both haunting and beautiful. The volunteer began documenting small victories, the gradual return of the dog's spirited gaze, the way his tail would wag tentatively at the sound of the volunteer's laughter, and the subtle easing of the deep-seated apprehension that had once clouded his every step. These moments were etched into memory with painstaking clarity, each one a fragile yet defiant spark against the long night of despair. Outside, the seasons in the city subtly shifted. The relentless heat of summer gave way to crisp autumn air, and the trees began their quiet transformation, leaves turning to brilliant hues of orange, red, and gold. Each change in the weather seemed to mirror the inner metamorphosis that was quietly taking place within the walls of their home. As nature itself prepared to shed old layers and embrace the vulnerability of change, so too did the dog cast off remnants of his past. Yet, amid the beauty of nature's cyclical regeneration, moments of inexplicable tension still surfaced. One damp evening, as the first tendrils of autumn chill crept into the air, the dog became unusually restless. His alert eye scanned every dimly lit corner of the modest living room, picking up sounds that others might miss, the faint rustle of leaves against the window, the subtle creaks of settling wood in the old building. The volunteer, sensing an unspoken signal of distress, gently coaxed him outside for a walk. Under the vast expanse of a twilight sky, they ventured into a nearby park, its pathways lined with trees that shed their summer brightness like memories. There, in the half-light of an almost surreal dusk, the silence was punctuated by small, abrupt moments of unease. The dog's ears twitched at every distant echo, and his muscles tensed in a way that spoke of old fears now revived by the haunting beauty of the night. An inexplicable sensation permeated the air, a sense that the park was more than just a simple collection of trees and benches, that it might somehow be a repository for the weight of unseen stories and unspoken tragedies. The volunteer's heart pounded in sympathy, his every sense alert to the possibility that this peaceful scene concealed layers of complexity, layers that might mirror the deeper struggles of his loyal companion. With a gentle hand on the dog's fur, the volunteer led him along a winding path, their footsteps quietly harmonizing with the soft patter of rain beginning to fall. The droplets glistened on the leaves like fragments of a shattered past, each one a reminder that healing is often as much about embracing vulnerability as it is about reclaiming hope. In those moments of shared introspection, both man and dog seemed to acknowledge that the journey toward wholeness was an ever-evolving dance, one fraught with unexpected turns and quiet revelations. In the tender interplay between the fading light and the emerging shadows, a deep, unspoken promise was rekindled, a promise that even when confronted with echoes of a painful past, the future could still be rewritten with every gentle act of care. The dog, whose once hardened spirit was now softened by the volunteer's constant presence, began to explore not just the physical spaces around him, but the boundaries of trust and vulnerability. His cautious steps were no longer mere movements, but deliberate acts of courage that defied the darkness he had once known. As the evening drew to a close and the park's lingering sounds gave way to an almost sacred hush, the volunteer carried the dog back home. Inside the warmth of that modest sanctuary, the lingering chill of the night was replaced by a deep and reassuring tranquility. Each shared moment, every glimmer of hope, served as a fragile stitch mending the torn fabric of both their lives, a silent, steadfast promise that no matter how deeply the past might be etched in scars, the future was ripe with endless possibility. In these unfolding days and nights, as the city continued its ceaseless rhythm outside and the personal world of the volunteer and his rescued companion grew richer with each passing moment, the narrative of their intertwined fates deepened in complexity and emotion. The transformation was not instantaneous, nor was it free from the occasional resurgence of forgotten fears, but in every trembling moment there existed the undeniable, powerful truth that redemption was always within reach. In the days that followed, the gentle pulse of everyday life took on a deeper, more resonant rhythm. The dog's recovery continued with an almost imperceptible yet profound slow unburdening of the past. His cautious steps, once hesitant and shadowed by the weight of abandonment, began to echo a quiet confidence. Each morning, the soft light of dawn revealed a subtle transformation, a glimmer of hope that shone through the remnants of his former despair. The volunteer, ever steadfast in his mission of compassion, observed these changes with a growing sense of both wonder and determination. He started to integrate more of the city's quiet corners into their daily routine. On one particularly crisp morning, when the air itself seemed to sing of new beginnings, he decided to take the dog along an old footpath that wound its way through a neglected urban garden. The garden, bordered by rusted wrought iron and wild, untamed blossoms, had a beauty that was raw and untethered, a tapestry of forgotten relics and bursts of natural resilience. As they traversed the gravel path, each crunch underfoot and every rustle of leaf and petal provided a meditative cadence to their journey. The garden was a living paradox of decay and rebirth. Overgrown ivy draped over crumbling stone benches, while clusters of daffodils and resilient wildflowers pushed defiantly through cracks in the pavement. Here, the volunteer felt that the landscape itself carried the echo of past sorrows, yet each tendril of green and each burst of color testified to the enduring spirit of life. The dog, his nose quivering with the excitement of new scents, moved with a blend of wary curiosity and unspoken trust. His eyes, now clearer and more responsive to the gentle world around him, flicked from the tiny wonders of nature to the compassionate gaze of his guardian. The connection between them deepened in that verdant sanctuary, where nature's quiet rebellion seemed to mirror the inner revolution unfolding in the small rescued creature. As they lingered in the garden's embrace, an unexpected encounter unfolded that would leave an indelible mark on their journey. An elderly gardener, stooped with age but radiating a quiet dignity, was tending to a battered shed of tools amidst the greenery. His weathered hands moved slowly as he pruned a vine that had nearly overtaken a once proud rose bush. The volunteer approached with the quiet humility of a man who understood life's unpredictable beauty, and the elderly gardener greeted him with a nod and a soft smile that spoke of countless seasons of loss and renewal. Their conversation was brief, a delicate exchange of gentle words about the power of nature to heal even the deepest wounds, but it resonated profoundly with both men. The gardener's murmurs about the resilience of the earth blended seamlessly with the volunteer's steadfast belief in the transformative power of care, and in that moment, there was an unspoken acknowledgement of life's fragile equilibrium. Their words, sparse as they were, reverberated in the crisp air, mingling with the soft rustle of the garden's hidden life. The volunteer listened intently as the gardener recounted tales of the many lives that had been nurtured in this small plot, a living library of resilience where every wilted leaf gave way to new bloom. The dog, too, seemed to pause, as if absorbing the quiet wisdom imparted by the steady, unhurried cadence of the gardener's voice. In that fleeting communion of souls, the boundaries between species, between past and present, blurred into a single, tangible hope. Returning to the volunteer's modest sanctuary later that day, the world outside had shifted subtly, as though influenced by the shared energies of that garden meeting. Inside the small, warmly lit room, familiar objects, the worn but cherished armchair, the gentle hum of a cherished radio, and an assortment of framed memories pinned to the wall, formed a cocoon of intimate recollection and possibility. The dog settled near a window where he could watch the interplay of light and shadow dancing slowly across the pavement. Each flicker and shimmer outside seemed to echo the slow, steady cadence of recovery, like a promise that even the deepest scars could eventually yield to softer hues of hope. But even in this quiet idyll, the city's pulse held whispers of forgotten secrets. Later that evening, as dusk deepened and a cool breeze wafted through open windows, the volunteer found himself restless. The setting sun left an indelible crimson glow across the horizon, mingling with the encroaching twilight to create a tapestry that was as unsettling as it was beautiful. Outside, the streets hummed with an energy that was at once familiar and perplexing, a subtle dissonance that hinted at stories better left untold. The gentle creak of old floorboards and the quiet murmur of distant voices seemed to suggest that beneath the veneer of everyday life, deeper mysteries still stirred. Unable to shake a growing sense of an impending revelation, the volunteer stepped out onto the modest porch with the dog at his side. The night air was cool, and the smell of rain on dry earth carried both promise and an undercurrent of wistful lament. There, under a sky strewn with tentative stars, the volunteer noticed a solitary figure moving slowly along the edge of the lot, a person whose presence seemed as tentative and burdened by secrets as the dog's own past. The encounter was brief, a glance was exchanged, heavy with unspoken understanding, before the figure melted into the shadows of the night. For a long moment, the volunteer stood still, the dog silent, steady presence at his side offering a small measure of comfort against the unknown. In the days and nights that followed, the echo of that mysterious presence lingered. It was as if the city itself had taken on a new dimension, a realm where every quiet gesture and soft-spoken memory resonated with the weight of both history and possibility. The volunteer couldn't help but wonder about the unseen layers of the urban landscape, where stories of quiet heroism and hidden pain intermingled with the everyday dance of survival. For the dog, every step taken in this reimagined world was a brave act of defiance against a past that still threatened to shape his every moment. In the wake of these encounters, the sanctuary of the volunteer's care became a crucible for both introspection and outward change. He began to document their journey in a worn leather journal, writing down the small triumphs and the unexpected heartaches that defined each day. The ink on the pages was a record of their evolution, a delicate chronicle of healing that merged the stark realities of neglect with the unyielding possibility of transformation. Every line carried the weight of memory and the soft glimmer of hope, binding the fragments of their lives into a cohesive, ever-unfolding narrative. By the time the silver light of dawn began to dispel the lingering shadows of night, the dog had grown accustomed to the rhythm of this new life, a life that was punctuated by small wonders and haunting enigmas alike. With every tentative step, every cautious sniff of air, he moved further away from the scars of isolation and towards a tender, if not entirely untroubled, future. The volunteer, too, felt his own burdens lift ever so slightly as he realized that the simple acts of kindness, the quiet exchanges with strangers, and the patient unfolding of each day were themselves quiet revolutions against a world that had once seemed irrevocably harsh. And so, in the delicate interplay of light and shadow, of hope intertwined with mystery, the narrative of their lives continued to evolve. The city's whispered secrets and the dog's silent tenacity merged to form an ongoing chapter, a tale of resilience that was as much about healing as it was about the unexpected beauty that emerges when compassion meets the unyielding forces of everyday life. A few days later, as the city awoke to a tender drizzle and a soft, diffused light, the dog and his guardian embarked on another journey, a subtle expedition into the quieter, lesser-known quarters of their urban landscape. In the renewed calm of early morning, they left the modest home behind and headed toward a narrow, cobbled street that had seen better days. The street, once a bustling thoroughfare, now echoed with the soft tapping of rain against uneven pavement and the murmur of distant voices beginning a new day. Along this route lay the neighborhood park, a confined yet intricately woven canvas of chipped stone, overgrown grass, and ancient trees whose sprawling branches whispered secrets of eras past. The dog, his head held just a bit higher than before, navigated the winding path with cautious determination. Each step appeared to be a quiet defiance of the brutal history that had once defined his existence. The volunteer, always gentle in his encouragement, walked close beside him, speaking in soft, measured tones that wove reassurances into the fabric of the morning air. As they progressed into the park's heart, the subtle yet constant play of sunlight and shadow brought forth an almost tangible contrast between fragility and resilience. The trees, venerable sentinels of the park, towered overhead with ancient wisdom, their leaves forming a mosaic of light that danced upon the ground. There was no grandiosity in the scene, only an organic beauty that spoke directly to the soul of a wanderer seeking solace in simplicity. The dog paused frequently, sniffing carefully at the ground as if deciphering the layered stories written in every fallen leaf and weathered stone. At one point, their path brought them close to a small, tranquil pond. Its surface, marred by delicate ripples from a light breeze, reflected the subdued brilliance of the awakening sky. Here, the volunteer allowed himself a moment of quiet contemplation. As he observed the gentle undulations on the water, his thoughts meandered between the stark, painful past and the unfolding promise of a fresh start. The dog, ever alert, sat by his side and tilted his head, its luminous eyes absorbing the scene with an intensity that spoke of both caution and hope. The connection between the two was profound, a silent dialogue that conveyed understanding beyond the reach of words. The serenity of the pond, however, was punctuated by an undercurrent of mystery. In a secluded corner along the water's edge, obscured by a copse of trees, a figure could be seen scribbling hurried notes in a weathered notebook. Dressed in neutral hues that allowed him to blend into the muted palette of the surroundings, the stranger seemed to be as much a part of this living tableau as the park itself. His presence was not overtly alarming, yet it imbued the air with a subtle tension, a sense that he, too, was a keeper of untold stories. The volunteer's eyes met those of the stranger for a fleeting moment, a silent acknowledgement passing between them as the stranger dipped his pen in ink and resumed his mysterious task. Returning to the path, the volunteer led the dog away from the pond with quiet resolve. Their journey continued through streets lined with modest shops and faded murals that captured the spirit of a community both bruised and unbowed by the relentless passage of time. The urban mosaic transformed again as they entered a busy crossroads where everyday life unfolded in a series of gentle collisions, a vendor arranging fresh produce with tender care, a child chasing a fluttering balloon, and elderly passers-by sharing knowing glances of camaraderie. For the dog, each new scene was a step further away from the ghosts of his past, a slow embrace of a world that held the promise of renewed affection. Yet beneath this veneer of revitalization, whispers of the strange and unforeseen lingered. On a quiet afternoon, while the city was awash in the golden hues of a setting sun, a peculiar incident disturbed the fragile equilibrium of routine. As the duo strolled through a familiar residential area where well-worn sidewalks were bordered by modest houses and thriving gardens, a sudden, inexplicable commotion arose near a seemingly ordinary doorway. In that brief, charged moment, the dog's ears pricked in alert, and his body stiffened in a silent readiness that belied the calm ambience of the surroundings. From the doorway emerged a young woman with eyes that held an intensity both alluring and unsettling. Her presence was marked by a confidence that contrasted starkly with the gentle pace of everyday life. She passed them in near silence, yet there was an ineffable sense of urgency in her stride, a fleeting glimpse of turmoil that hinted at burdens far heavier than her unassuming appearance might suggest. The volunteer watched her go, noting every detail, the way her hair caught the last rays of sunlight, the subtle tremor in her hand as she clutched a small, battered envelope close to her heart. For a fleeting moment, the air seemed to thrum with an energy that was both enigmatic and deeply personal, a reminder that every human story, much like the dog's own, harbored chapters of unforeseen sorrow and hidden hope. Even as the day yielded to twilight, the emotional imprint of that encounter lingered. Back in the modest warmth of their sanctuary, the volunteer found himself ruminating over the day's disparate moments, each one a brushstroke in a painting filled with both light and dark. The dog, now resting peacefully in his favorite spot near the window, remained a steadfast presence, a living symbol of resilience forged in the fires of neglect and nourished by the tender ministrations of care. The volunteer, his thoughts abuzz with reflections of the day's quiet anomalies and subtle intimations, resolved to chronicle these delicate impressions in his worn journal. Every observation, every ephemeral connection, was a vital thread in the continuous tapestry of recovery and transformation. In the muted embrace of the evening, as the city's clamor softened into the steady lull of nocturnal rhythms, the bond between the dog and his guardian deepened further. Their shared journey was no longer merely about healing old wounds, it was an evolving narrative, a quiet odyssey of finding beauty in the midst of imperfection and meaning in the interplay of the everyday with the inexplicable. Through every gentle step and each moment of unspoken understanding, the echoes of the past gave way, however slowly, to the promise of a future redefined by empathy, courage, and the persistent glow of hope. Under a bruised sky heavy with the twilight of change, the city itself seemed to lean in closer, as if compelled to witness the unfolding of a quiet miracle. The dog's journey, entwined with the compassionate vigil of his guardian, was reaching a crescendo, a symphony of small, quiet revolutions that rippled through every corner of their shared world. In the lingering glow of dusk, every moment carried a weight of meaning, every whispered detail of the urban landscape a subtle echo of a past that was slowly but surely healing. As the evening deepened, the volunteer, whose eyes had once seen only the hardened edges of a calloused life, found his heart softened by the fragile triumphs that the rescued soul beside him evoked each day. In the dim light of the living room, where worn photographs and memories stitched into the quiet atmosphere bore witness to their intertwined histories, there emerged an unmistakable sense of transformation. The dog, no longer merely a symbol of neglect but a beacon of enduring resilience, moved with a measured dignity through the modest confines of their home. Its once tremulous limbs now carried the quiet strength of recovery, and its eyes, deep and stirring, shimmered with the unspoken promise of renewal. Outside, the city continued its restless murmurs, a tangled tapestry of familiar voices and unexpected secrets that had both tormented and inspired the pair along their journey. On a wet cobblestone street glistening under the soft luminance of streetlights, the volunteer walked alongside his faithful friend as they retraced the roots of earlier encounters. Each step they took was a measured defiance against the shadows of abandonment, each silent glance toward the night a shared communion of hope and pain. The chill of the air mingled with the lingering warmth of memories, a juxtaposition so vivid it rendered the ordinary extraordinary. A sudden gust of wind swept through the narrow alleyway they passed, stirring old papers and long-forgotten tokens of lives once lived with abandon. In that moment, the volunteer paused, his gaze drawn to a weathered, crumbling wall where a mural, an abstract burst of color amid urban decay, had persisted against all odds. The image, alive with chaotic beauty and defiant optimism, resonated deeply with him. It was as if the mural itself told the story of every soul that had ever fought to overcome a past marred by neglect and despair. In that shared silence between man and animal, the city whispered its secrets and lessons, urging them forward on their intertwined path. The hours wove into a tapestry of memories and revelations. In the sanctuary of a small community garden, nestled behind a row of abandoned shops whose broken windows spoke of lost dreams, the duo paused once more. Here, nature reasserted its delicate dominion over concrete and steel. Vines clung to peeling walls, wildflowers emerged boldly from cracks in the pavement, and the soft rustle of leaves created a lullaby for those willing to listen. The volunteer knelt to gently pat the dog's head, a simple gesture that encapsulated every unspoken word of care and perseverance. In that garden, amid the interplay of vibrant life and persistent decay, the bond between them was reaffirmed, a living testament to the transformative power of tender, steadfast love. In a nearby park, where the silhouettes of ancient trees stood as silent witnesses to the passage of time, the volunteer and the dog encountered a small gathering of local residents. Their eyes, though weathered by the hardships of urban existence, sparkled with curiosity and a dawning recognition of the subtle changes that had swept over their neighborhood. As the group exchanged soft nods and quiet smiles, there emerged an unspoken communal acknowledgement. Each person carried a story of hardship and redemption, each had seen the transformative grace of unexpected kindness. The dog, at the center of this gathering, seemed to radiate a quiet pride, a humble reminder that even the most broken spirit could mend under the right care. The volunteer's heart swelled with gratitude, for in that moment he recognized that their journey was not solitary but a thread woven into the broader fabric of human resilience. Later that night, as the city's neon lights flickered softly against the encroaching darkness, the volunteer returned home with the dog trotting quietly by his side. In the solitude of their modest dwelling, illuminated only by the soft glow of a table lamp and the distant hum of midnight traffic, the pair settled into a tranquil, reflective silence. The volunteer reached for his journal, a leather-bound repository of countless musings, and began to pen the final lines of a long, arduous chapter. Every word was laden with the raw, unfiltered truth of their shared voyage, their ups and downs, the moments of unrelenting solitude, and the gentle triumphs that had blossomed against all odds. His pen moved as if guided by the very essence of their transformation, a recollection of scars slowly fading beneath the tender ministrations of compassion. The dog, curled up near the window with eyes half closed in repose, was a living testament to that journey. Its dreams, perhaps filled with the gentle echoes of moments past and hopeful visions of an unburdened future, lent an air of serene mystery to the quiet room. Beyond the glass, the night stretched out like an endless canvas, dotted with stars that dared to pierce the darkness, a celestial mirror to the transformative light that now imbued their lives. In those final hours of introspection, the volunteer allowed himself a moment of vulnerability, a raw, honest soliloquy to the night. He recalled the first agonizing days when the dog had been nothing more than a ghost wandering the forlorn alleyways of a merciless city, its spirit crushed by neglect. The memory stirred a pang deep within him, a reminder of every failure, every moment when the weight of indifference had threatened to crush all hope. Yet, as he looked upon the calm, steady rise and fall of his companion's chest, he knew that this narrative was far from written in tragedy. Instead, it was a chronicle of resilience. Every setback had sown the seeds for a future where both beast and man would rise again. As the first light of dawn began to erode the heavy cloak of night, the city itself seemed to exhale a deep, collective sigh, a release of old burdens in anticipation of a new day. The volunteer gently roused the dog, and together they stepped outside into that early morning glow, where every dewdrop sparkled like a remnant of their past strife, transformed into a beacon of hope. The streets, washed anew by the tender caress of night's end, bore silent witness to the promise of rebirth. Every shadow that had once seemed foreboding was now softened by the indomitable light of new beginnings. In that serene morning, the volunteer walked with his faithful friend along a familiar path that had been etched into their hearts, a path that symbolized every struggle, every tender moment of care, and every unforeseen collision with the mysterious fabric of the urban tapestry. Every footstep was a silent vow that the darkness of yesterday would make way for the luminous promise of tomorrow. Their journey, fraught with unforeseen detours and punctuated by moments that danced between the ordinary and the inexplicable, had reached a resolute, heartening crescendo, a poignant testimony to the unexpected beauty that blooms when compassion meets a resolute spirit. And so, as the day slowly unfurled its gentle light across the horizon, the volunteer and the dog moved forward into the new morning with a quiet certainty. Their lives, once marred by the scars of indifference and abandonment, had been repainted in hues of resilience and tender hope. Every whispered promise of the night had coalesced into a vibrant reaffirmation of life, an ode to the transformative power of empathy, the enduring beauty of second chances, and the quiet, steadfast courage that can emerge from even the deepest wounds. In that final, lingering moment before the city awoke fully, there remained an unspoken promise in the cool, invigorating air, a promise that no matter how dark the night might have once been, the coming dawn held the power to rewrite the future. The volunteer, with eyes reflecting the soft luminescence of early light and a heart buoyed by the silent affirmation of every small victory, pressed forward with the dog faithfully at his side. They moved as one through a world that had learned to balance the gentle cadence of everyday life with the more enigmatic, haunting symphony of the unexpected. This story, woven through a narrative of loss, hope, and arduous renewal, celebrated the delicate intersections of beauty and pain. It was a living reminder that every soul, whether canine or human, carries within it an incandescent spark waiting to be nurtured, capable of transforming even the bleakest past into a future rich with possibility. And as the morning sun climbed higher, casting golden hues across the awakening city, it illuminated not just the cobblestone pathways and silent parks, but also the indomitable spirit of two beings united by fate, driven by compassion, and forever transformed by the quiet power of love.